The morning I found the notice taped to my front door, I was still half asleep, stumbling outside in my slippers to grab the newspaper from my driveway in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The bright pink paper stood out against the dark green paint like a neon sign screaming for attention. I ripped it off, leaving a small piece of tape stuck to the wood, and squinted at the bold letters printed across the top. Violation notice, it read, and my stomach dropped even though I had no idea what I could possibly be in trouble for. I kept my lawn mowed, my trash bins hidden behind the fence, and I had not painted anything or made any modifications to my house. The neighborhood looked pristine, exactly how the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association demanded it be. I scanned down to the actual complaint, my eyes moving faster as confusion turned to disbelief. Dear homeowner, it has come to the attention of the HOA board that rock salt has been applied to the shared walkways connecting the mailbox cluster to the main sidewalk. As per the emergency meeting held on February 3, 2025, the use of rock salt on any shared community spaces is hereby banned due to environmental concerns and potential damage to landscaping. The board has approved only eco-friendly ice melt alternatives. Failure to comply will result in fines of $150 per violation. The rock salt currently present must be removed immediately. Sincerely, Patricia Henderson, HOA President. I stood there in the freezing February air, my breath creating small clouds in front of my face, reading the notice 3 more times to make sure I was not hallucinating. Rock salt was banned, the stuff that actually worked to keep ice from forming into death traps on walkways. I looked down at the path that ran from my property line to the cluster of mailboxes that served our section of the neighborhood. Sure enough, there were still some remnants of the rock salt I had spread 2 days ago after that nasty ice storm. The thing was, this was not even technically HOA property in the traditional sense. The path ran along the edge of my lot, and while it connected to the communal mailbox area, I had always maintained it myself. The previous owner had apparently done the same, and when I bought the house 3 years ago, my real estate agent had mentioned it as a courtesy I was extending to my neighbors. Nobody from the HOA had ever maintained that path. Not once. They did not shovel it, they did not salt it, and they certainly did not do anything to make it safer during Iowa's brutal winters. I crumpled the notice in my fist and went back inside, my good mood thoroughly ruined. My name is Blake Norton, and I am a 34-year-old software developer who works from home. I bought this house specifically because it seemed like a quiet neighborhood where I could focus on my work without drama. The HOA had seemed reasonable during the buying process. The fees were not outrageous, and the rules seemed standard enough. But over the past 3 years, Patricia Henderson had become president, and things had slowly deteriorated into petty tyranny. My phone rang just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee. It was my neighbor, Tom, who lived 2 houses down. "Did you get one too?" he asked without preamble. "The pink paper of doom?" "Yeah, just found it." "This is insane, Blake. My wife almost broke her ankle yesterday on the ice near the mailboxes. Now they want us to use that eco-friendly garbage that does not work when it is below 20 degrees. It is 15 degrees outside right now." I walked to my window and looked out at the thermometer mounted on my back porch. 13 degrees, actually. What are they expecting us to do? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Patricia did not care about practical solutions. She cared about looking progressive and environmentally conscious to her friends in the neighborhood Facebook group. "I don't know, man, but I am not paying a $150 fine for keeping people safe. Are you going to the meeting tonight?" "What meeting?" Check your email. Patricia called an emergency session for 6 tonight at the community center. Attendance is strongly encouraged. The way Tom said it, I could hear the eye roll through the phone. After we hung up, I checked my email and found the message buried under spam. The meeting was mandatory for anyone who had received a violation notice, which apparently was everyone who lived near the mailbox clusters. I spent the rest of the day trying to work, but my mind kept drifting back to that stupid pink notice. By 5:30, I was in my car heading to the Meadowbrook Estates Community Center, a small building at the entrance of our subdivision that mostly sat empty except for HOA meetings and the occasional baby shower. The parking lot was packed. I had to park near the street and walk back, my boots crunching on the salt-free ice that had formed over the asphalt. Inside, the room was standing room only. I recognized most of the faces, neighbors I waved to but did not really know. Everyone looked irritated. Patricia Henderson stood at the front of the room behind a folding table, flanked by 2 other board members I vaguely recognized. Patricia was exactly what you would imagine when you heard the phrase HOA president. She was probably in her mid-50s, with a blonde bob that looked like it required weekly maintenance, wearing a pantsuit that seemed too formal for a neighborhood meeting. She had that particular expression of someone who believed they were always the smartest person in the room, even when they were demonstrably wrong. "Everyone, please settle down," Patricia said, tapping a gavel against the table even though nobody was being particularly loud. "We have a lot to cover tonight, and I want to make sure everyone understands the new regulations." "We understand them just fine, Patricia," called out a woman from the back. I recognized her as Linda, an elderly lady who had lived in the neighborhood for 20 years. "We understand that you want us to stop using the only thing that actually prevents us from breaking our necks on the ice." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Patricia's smile tightened, but she maintained her composure. "I understand your concerns, but we have to think about the bigger picture here. Rock salt damages concrete, kills plants, and harms the environment. There are plenty of alternative products available that are just as effective and much safer for our community." "They don't work," Tom shouted from somewhere to my left. "I tried that eco-friendly stuff last year, and it was useless once the temperature dropped below freezing." "That is simply not true," Patricia countered. "If used correctly and in appropriate amounts, these products are perfectly adequate. The board has done extensive research on this." I raised my hand, feeling ridiculous like I was back in school. Patricia pointed at me with a forced smile. "Yes, Blake. Can you tell us exactly what research you did?" "Because I looked up reviews of most of those products before I bought my rock salt, and they all say the same thing. They work fine for light frost, but once you get actual ice or temperatures below 20 degrees, they are ineffective." Patricia's face flushed slightly. "We consulted with environmental experts and reviewed multiple products. The board stands by its decision." "Which experts?" Another voice called out. "Can you give us names?" "This is not a trial," Patricia snapped, her composure cracking just a bit. "The decision has been made. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to ensure everyone understands the new policy and to answer questions about compliance, not to debate the merits of the policy itself." That did not go over well. The room erupted in overlapping voices, people shouting questions and complaints. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly, calling for order. One of the other board members, a thin man whose name I thought was Gregory, leaned over and whispered something to her. She nodded and held up her hands. "Everyone, please. If you are concerned about safety on the walkways, we encourage you to simply avoid using them when conditions are dangerous. You can access your mailboxes by driving to them instead of walking. The absurdity of that statement hung in the air for a moment before people started laughing. Drive to mailboxes that were specifically placed in walking clusters to reduce vehicle traffic. Park on the narrow street and risk getting hit by passing cars. That is not a solution, Patricia, I said, loud enough to be heard over the noise. Those walkways exist specifically so people can safely walk to their mailboxes. If you are going to ban the only effective de-icing method, what is the HOA going to do to maintain those paths? Patricia blinked at me. The walkways are maintained by the residents whose properties they border. That has always been the policy. Right, and we have been maintaining them with rock salt. So if you are banning that, what should we use instead? And if the alternatives do not work, who is liable when someone gets hurt? I could see Patricia's jaw tighten. She did not have a good answer because there was not one. Residents are expected to use the approved alternatives and to apply them regularly to maintain safe conditions. Even though they don't work. Tom chimed in again. They do work if used properly, Patricia insisted, her voice rising. Then show us, I said. The words came out before I fully thought them through, but once they were out there, I committed. It is 13 degrees outside. There is ice on the walkways right now. Let's go outside and you can show us how well these products work compared to rock salt. The room went silent. Patricia stared at me like I had just challenged her to a duel, in a way I supposed I had. That is not necessary, Blake. We are not here to perform demonstrations. Why not? If you are so confident in these products, prove it. Otherwise, you are asking us to stop using something that works and pay fines for protecting ourselves and our neighbors. All based on what? Your word. Other people started agreeing, calling for Patricia to demonstrate these miracle products. She looked flustered, glancing at the other board members for support. Gregory whispered to her again and she shook her head firmly. This meeting is adjourned. The policy stands as written. Anyone found using rock salt on shared community spaces will be fined. No exceptions. You all received your notices, and we expect compliance starting immediately. She gathered her papers, and the 3 board members practically fled the room through a back door. The rest of us stood there, stunned by how quickly she had shut everything down. Well, that was productive, Tom said, appearing at my elbow. What are you going to do? I thought about it for a moment, looking around at all the frustrated faces in the room. An idea was forming in my head, one that felt both perfectly reasonable and deliciously petty at the same time. I am going to follow the rules exactly as written, I said slowly. Tom looked confused. What do you mean? Patricia said rock salt is banned on shared community spaces. Fine. She also said that residents are responsible for maintaining walkways that border their properties. Also fine. But here is the thing, Tom. That path running from my property to the mailboxes. I have been maintaining it as a courtesy. If the HOA is going to dictate what I can and cannot use, while simultaneously refusing to take any responsibility for actually maintaining those spaces themselves, then I am done maintaining it. Understanding dawned on Tom's face. You are going to stop clearing the path, completely. No shoveling, no salting with anything, no maintenance whatsoever. Let's see how long it takes before people realize that the HOA is not going to do it either. That is going to make a lot of people angry, Tom warned. Probably, but they should be angry at the HOA, not at me. I have been maintaining that path for 3 years at my own expense, using my own time and my own materials. Patricia just banned the only effective tool I have for doing it safely. So, I am following her logic. If I cannot do it right, I will not do it at all. The next morning, I woke up to 3 inches of fresh snow. Perfect timing. I looked out my front window and saw several neighbors trudging through the snow on their way to the mailboxes. The path that I usually cleared by 8 in the morning remained untouched. My own driveway and the walkway from my front door to the sidewalk were perfectly cleared. I had used rock salt on my personal property because that was still allowed. But the shared path, buried in snow, my phone started ringing around 9. It was a number I did not recognize, but I answered anyway. Blake Norton, speaking. This is Patricia Henderson. I noticed that the walkway to the mailbox cluster has not been cleared this morning. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. That is correct. A pause. You are required to maintain that walkway. It borders your property. I have maintained it as a courtesy for the past 3 years, Patricia. But given the new restrictions on what products I can use, and the fact that the approved alternatives do not work in these temperatures, I have decided it is not safe for me to take on that liability anymore. Excuse me. Her voice went up an octave. Think about it. If I use the eco-friendly products that don't work, and someone slips and gets hurt, they could sue me for negligent maintenance. If I use rock salt, you will fine me. The only logical solution is to stop maintaining the path altogether. I am keeping my own property clear, which is all I am legally required to do as a homeowner. That is absurd. You cannot just stop maintaining a shared walkway. Can you show me in the HOA bylaws where it says I am required to maintain it? Because I reviewed them last night, Patricia, and there is nothing that specifically mandates it. The only mention of walkway maintenance says that the HOA is responsible for common areas, and property owners are responsible for their own lots. That path is technically a common area. I could hear Patricia breathing heavily on the other end of the line. We will discuss this at the next board meeting. Looking forward to it. She hung up without saying goodbye. I felt a small surge of satisfaction, even though I knew this was just the beginning. By noon, I had received text messages from 3 different neighbors asking what was going on with the path. I explained the situation to each of them, and reactions were mixed. Some people understood and were supportive. Others were frustrated that they now had to trudge through snow to get their mail. I pointed out that they should contact the HOA and demand that Patricia send someone to clear the path since it was community property. By day 3, the path was a disaster. The snow had been trampled down and partially melted by foot traffic during the day, then frozen solid at night, creating a lumpy, treacherous surface. I watched from my window as people picked their way carefully across it, some of them shooting angry glances toward my house. My phone kept ringing, but I stopped answering calls from unknown numbers. On day 4, I found another pink notice on my door. This one informed me that I was in violation of community standards for failing to maintain adjacent walkways, and that I needed to remedy the situation within 48 hours or face a fine of $200. I took a picture of the notice and called my real estate attorney, a sharp woman named Jennifer who had handled my home purchase. "Can they do this?" I asked after explaining the situation. "Let me look at your HOA bylaws and get back to you," Jennifer said. But off the top of my head, if that walkway is technically community property, they cannot force you to maintain it and then fine you for not doing so. That would be like them fining you for not mowing the communal grass areas. That is what I thought. Give me a day to review everything, and I will send you a formal opinion. Do not pay any fine until we talk again. The next day, Jennifer called back with good news. According to the bylaws, the HOA was indeed responsible for maintaining all common areas, which included the walkway systems connecting the mailbox clusters. Individual homeowners could volunteer to maintain sections bordering their property. but it was not mandatory. The violation notice Patricia had sent me was invalid. I am going to draft a response letter, Jennifer said. We will cite the specific sections of the bylaws and inform them that you are not responsible for that walkway's maintenance. We will also point out that their attempt to fine you is improper and could be considered harassment. How much is this going to cost me? I asked, wincing. Attorneys were not cheap. For a letter, $200, same as the fine they are threatening. Consider it an investment in not being pushed around by an overreaching HOA president. I agreed, and Jennifer had the letter drafted and sent within 2 days. It was a thing of beauty, written in formal legal language that basically told Patricia and the board to back off and do their jobs. The letter arrived at the HOA management office on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday afternoon, I got a very different kind of phone call. This time it was Gregory, the other board member I had seen at the meeting. Blake, this is Gregory Chen from the HOA board. I wanted to reach out personally about this situation with the walkway. Okay. Look, I will be honest with you. Patricia is very upset about the letter from your attorney, but between you and me, I think you have a valid point. I have been reviewing the bylaws myself, and you are right that we cannot force you to maintain community property. Then why did Patricia send me a violation notice? Gregory sighed. Patricia is very committed to her vision for the neighborhood. Sometimes she gets ahead of herself. I am trying to smooth things over here. Is there any way we can come to a compromise? Sure. Repeal the rock salt ban, and I will go back to maintaining the path like I have been. I do not think Patricia will agree to that. Then I guess we do not have a compromise. Gregory, I am not trying to be difficult, but this is completely unreasonable. Patricia banned the only product that actually works, offered no real alternative, and then tried to force me to maintain property that is not mine using methods that are ineffective. I am happy to go back to clearing that path. I actually like doing it because I enjoy helping my neighbors, but not under these conditions. I understand. Let me see what I can do. He hung up, and I went back to work. That evening, Tom came by with a 6-pack of beer. You have officially pissed off Patricia, he said, handing me a bottle as we sat on my back porch despite the cold. She has been going house to house, talking to people about what a problem you are. Let me guess. She is saying I am being selfish and making things hard for everyone. Pretty much. But here is the thing, a lot of people agree with you. Linda, the older lady from the meeting, she started a petition to reverse the rock salt ban. She has already got like 30 signatures. That was encouraging. Good for Linda. Patricia is not going to back down on this, Blake. She has made it her hill to die on. Something about her sister being an environmental consultant who recommended the eco-friendly products. And there it was. The real reason for the ban had nothing to do with genuine environmental concerns or community safety. Patricia was trying to help her sister's business by forcing the neighborhood to buy overpriced, ineffective products. Did her sister provide those products to the board for testing? I asked. Tom's eyes widened. I do not know, but that would be a pretty serious conflict of interest, would it not? Sure would. I called Jennifer again the next morning and mentioned what Tom had told me. She was very interested. If Patricia is pushing these products because of a family business connection, and especially if she is profiting from it in any way, that is a major problem. HOA board members have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of the community, not their personal interests. Do you know the sister's name or business? Not yet, but I can find out. It turned out that was not hard at all. I posted a casual question in the neighborhood Facebook group, asking if anyone knew where to buy the HOA-approved ice melt products. Within an hour, Someone had linked to a website called Eco-Safe Solutions, run by Karen Henderson Marsh. The family resemblance in the profile photo was unmistakable. Patricia and Karen looked like they could be twins. I sent the link to Jennifer, who was quiet for a long moment. "This is very problematic," she finally said. "If Patricia mandated the use of these products without disclosing her relationship to the business owner, that is a breach of her fiduciary duty. It might even be fraud, depending on whether she is receiving any kickbacks. What should we do?" "I need to send another letter, this time to the entire HOA board and their management company. I am going to request full disclosure of any business relationships between board members and vendors, and I am going to cite specific Iowa statutes regarding HOA governance. This could actually force Patricia to step down if we push it. I do not necessarily want to destroy her life, Jennifer. I just want to be able to salt the walkway. I understand, but this is bigger than just the salt issue now. If Patricia is using her position to enrich her sister's business at the expense of the community, that is corruption. Other homeowners deserve to know about it." She had a point. I authorized Jennifer to send the letter, and this time I also asked her to send copies to every member of the HOA board individually, not just to the main office. I wanted to make sure they all saw it and could not claim ignorance. The response was explosive. Within 24 hours of the letters being delivered, I received a call from the HOA management company. The woman on the phone sounded stressed. "Mr. Norton, this is Deborah Ellis from Premier HOA Management. We handle the administrative services for Meadowbrook Estates. I am calling about the letters we received from your attorney regarding Patricia Henderson and potential conflicts of interest. Okay. I want you to know that we were not aware of any family relationship between Miss Henderson and Eco-Safe Solutions. We are taking these allegations very seriously. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow night, and your presence would be appreciated. Will Patricia be there?" A pause. "Miss Henderson has been temporarily suspended from her duties pending an investigation into the matters raised in your attorney's letter. Gregory Chen is serving as acting president." I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was satisfied that Patricia was finally facing consequences. Part of me felt bad because this had escalated way beyond what I had intended. But then I remembered her smug face at that first meeting, the way she had dismissed everyone's legitimate safety concerns, and I felt less guilty. The emergency meeting was packed even fuller than the first one. This time, though, the mood was different. People were not just frustrated, they were angry. Word had spread about Patricia's connection to Eco-Safe Solutions, and people felt betrayed. Gregory stood at the front table, looking distinctly uncomfortable. The other board member was there too, along with Deborah from the management company. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Gregory began. "I know there has been a lot of confusion and concern over the past week regarding the rock salt ban and other issues. I want to address everything directly and transparently." He went on to explain that the board had been reviewing the situation and had discovered that Patricia had indeed failed to disclose her sister's business when recommending the ban on rock salt. Patricia had voted on the measure without recusing herself, which was a clear violation of the HOA's governing documents and Iowa law regarding conflicts of interest. "The board's vote on the rock salt ban has been invalidated," Gregory continued. "Effective immediately, homeowners may use rock salt or any other de-icing method they choose on shared walkways and common areas. We apologize for the confusion and any inconvenience this has caused." A wave of relief and satisfaction washed through the room. Linda actually started clapping and others joined in. "What about Patricia?" someone called out. Is she still on the board? Gregory looked at Deborah, who stood up to address the crowd. Patricia Henderson has been removed from the board by unanimous vote of the remaining directors. The management company has also recommended that the HOA pursue reimbursement for any profits she or her sister gained through the improper vendor recommendation. Additionally, we are reviewing all other vendor relationships approved during Ms. Henderson's tenure to ensure there are no other conflicts of interest. What about the fines she issued? I asked. I know several people got violation notices. All fines related to the rock salt ban have been voided. You will receive written confirmation within the next few days. Mr. Norton, we owe you particular thanks for bringing this matter to our attention. If you had not pushed back, we might never have discovered the conflict of interest. I nodded, feeling vindicated but also a bit overwhelmed. This had spiraled much bigger than I ever anticipated. After the meeting, at least a dozen neighbors came up to thank me personally. Tom clapped me on the back. You did it, man. You took on Patricia and won. I just wanted to use rock salt, I said, but I was smiling. The next morning, I was up early with my spreader full of rock salt, clearing the path to the mailboxes just like I had always done. The satisfaction of seeing those white crystals scatter across the pavement was immense. It was not just about the salt, though. It was about standing up against arbitrary rules that did not make sense, against someone abusing their authority for personal gain. But the story did not end there. It turned out Patricia was not willing to go quietly. 2 weeks after her removal from the board, I received a letter from a different attorney. Patricia was suing me personally for defamation and tortious interference with business relations, claiming that my actions had damaged her reputation and harmed her sister's business. The lawsuit asked for $50,000 in damages. I immediately called Jennifer, my hands shaking as I held the letter. She is suing me. Can she do that? Jennifer asked me to scan and send the complaint. 30 minutes later, she called back. This is a slap suit, Jennifer said firmly. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She is trying to intimidate you into backing down by burying you in legal fees. Iowa has anti-slap statutes that protect people who speak out on matters of public concern. We are going to file a motion to dismiss, and if we are successful, she will have to pay your attorney fees. And if we are not successful, then we defend you at trial, but I do not think it will come to that. You did not defame Patricia. You pointed out factual information about a conflict of interest. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation, and you certainly did not interfere with her sister's business. If anything, Patricia interfered with other people's businesses by unfairly mandating that everyone use eco-safe solutions. The next few months were stressful. The lawsuit hung over my head like a dark cloud, even though Jennifer kept assuring me that it was meritless. We filed the motion to dismiss under Iowa's anti-slap statute, and Patricia's attorney filed a response arguing that the statute did not apply. Back and forth it went, with legal filings and court dates that required me to take time off work. Meanwhile, the neighborhood had settled into a new normal. Gregory was doing a decent job as HOA president. The rock salt flowed freely. People could safely walk to their mailboxes without risking broken bones. And I had gone from being just another homeowner to being somewhat of a local legend. People called me the guy who took down Patricia Henderson. The hearing on our motion to dismiss was scheduled for June, 4 months after Patricia filed her lawsuit. Jennifer and I arrived at the Lynn County Courthouse in Cedar Rapids on a humid Tuesday morning. Patricia was there with her attorney, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit. She would not make eye contact with me. Judge Martinez heard arguments from both sides. Patricia's attorney argued that I had maliciously spread false information about his client with the intent to harm her reputation and her sister's business. Jennifer countered that everything I had said was true and verifiable, that I had a right to point out conflicts of interest in HOA governance, and that Patricia's lawsuit was a textbook example of trying to silence protected speech. Judge Martinez asked several pointed questions about what specifically I had said that was false. Patricia's attorney kept citing my campaign against his client, but when pressed for specific false statements, he could not provide any. Everything I had said or written was documented fact. Patricia had not disclosed her sister's business. She had pushed for a ban on products that would benefit that business. She had tried to fine me for not maintaining property that was not mine. The judge took the matter under advisement and said she would issue a ruling within 30 days. Those 30 days were some of the longest of my life. I tried to focus on work, on enjoying the summer weather, on anything other than the pending lawsuit. Jennifer kept telling me to relax, that she was confident we would win, but it was hard not to worry. 23 days later, I got the call from Jennifer. I could hear the smile in her voice before she even spoke. We won. Complete dismissal with prejudice, meaning Patricia cannot refile, and the judge awarded attorney fees. Patricia has to reimburse you for all legal costs associated with defending the lawsuit. I actually let out a whoop of joy, startling my cat who had been sleeping on my desk. Are you serious? Completely serious. Judge Martinez did not hold back in her ruling either. She called the lawsuit frivolous and noted that it appeared to be filed in bad faith to intimidate you from exercising your rights as a homeowner and community member. This is a huge win, Blake. What happens now? Patricia's attorney has 30 days to pay your legal fees, which currently total about $8,000. If they do not pay, we can pursue collection, potentially including liens on her property. After that, the case is over. She is done. I felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. That evening, I decided to celebrate by grilling out on my back porch. Tom came over when he smelled the steaks cooking, and I filled him in on the good news. I heard Patricia and her husband are thinking about moving, Tom said, opening a beer. Apparently, she is too embarrassed to stay in the neighborhood after everything that has happened. I almost feel bad, I said, and I meant it. Almost. Do not. She brought this on herself. She could have just been a normal HOA president, you know? Kept things running smoothly, listened to residents' concerns, made reasonable decisions. Instead, she tried to turn her position into a way to help her sister's business, and when you called her out on it, she tried to sue you into silence. She deserves what she got. We ate our steaks and watched the sun set over the neighborhood. It was peaceful, the kind of peaceful I had hoped for when I first moved to Meadowbrook Estates 3 years earlier. But just when I thought everything was finally over, I got one more surprise. It was a Saturday morning in July, and I was washing my car in the driveway when a police cruiser pulled up in front of my house. My heart rate spiked. Had something happened? Was I in trouble for something? 2 officers got out, and the older one approached me with a professional but neutral expression. Blake Norton. Yes, that is me. Is everything okay? I am Officer Davis, and this is Officer Ramirez. We need to ask you some questions about Patricia Henderson and Eco-Safe Solutions. Do you have a few minutes? I nodded, confused but cooperative. They asked if we could speak inside, and I led them to my living room, offering coffee that they politely declined. Mr. Norton, we are investigating allegations of fraud and embezzlement related to the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA. Your name came up in our investigation as someone who initially raised concerns about conflicts of interest. Can you walk us through what happened? I spent the next hour telling them everything. The rock salt ban, the discovery of Patricia's sister's business, the lawsuit, all of it. Officer Davis took notes while Officer Ramirez asked follow-up questions. When I finished, Officer Davis closed his notebook. What you have told us aligns with information we received from the HOA's management company and from other residents. We are also looking into financial irregularities beyond just the eco-safe solutions issue. It appears that Ms. Henderson may have been approving invoices from several vendors that had inflated charges, possibly receiving kickbacks. Are you serious? I was stunned. I thought the eco-safe thing was bad enough, but actual embezzlement. We are still gathering evidence. But yes, it appears to be a larger pattern of misconduct. We wanted to talk to you because you were one of the first people to identify a problem and push back. We may need you to testify if charges are filed. Would you be willing to do that? Absolutely. If Patricia was stealing from the HOA, people deserve to know. We all pay those fees every month. The officers thanked me for my time and left. I sat on my couch for a long time afterward, processing what I had just learned. This had gone from a dispute about rock salt to uncovering what sounded like serious criminal activity. Over the next few weeks, the investigation became public knowledge in the neighborhood. The police interviewed multiple board members, reviewed financial records going back 3 years, and spoke with vendors who had done work for the HOA. The neighborhood Facebook group was on fire with speculation and outrage. People were digging through old financial reports, finding irregularities everywhere. In September, Patricia Henderson was arrested and charged with theft by deception and fraudulent practices, both serious felonies under Iowa law. According to the criminal complaint, she had embezzled approximately $75,000 from the HOA over a 2-year period through various schemes, including the Eco-Safe Solutions kickback arrangement, inflated invoices from her brother-in-law's landscaping company, and outright falsification of expense reports. The arrest made the local news. I watched the coverage showing Patricia being led out of her house in handcuffs, her face hidden behind her hand as reporters shouted questions. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Yes, she had brought this on herself. Yes, she deserved to face consequences for stealing from the community. But it was still surreal to see someone I had known, however antagonistically, being arrested. The criminal case moved slowly, as these things do. Patricia hired a criminal defense attorney and initially pled not guilty. The HOA, now under competent leadership, filed a civil lawsuit against Patricia seeking reimbursement for all stolen funds plus damages. Her sister's business, Eco-Safe Solutions, was also named in the civil suit for its role in the fraudulent scheme. I was deposed for both the criminal case and the civil case, spending hours answering questions about what I knew and when I knew it. It was exhausting and tedious, but I felt obligated to see it through. This was not about me anymore. This was about making sure that someone who had abused their position of trust faced appropriate consequences. In December, almost 10 months after I first found that pink violation notice on my door, Patricia changed her plea to guilty as part of a plea agreement. In exchange for her cooperation in identifying all of the fraudulent transactions and helping the HOA recover funds, the prosecution agreed to recommend a sentence of 5 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 3 years, plus full restitution of the $75,000. The sentencing hearing was in January. I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom gallery. Patricia looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her attorney made a statement about how she was deeply sorry, how she had made terrible mistakes, how she hoped to make amends. Patricia herself gave a tearful apology to the community, though she never looked at the gallery where several Meadowbrook Estates residents sat watching. Judge Rodriguez, a different judge from the one who had handled my defamation case, was not swayed by the tears. He noted that Patricia had been in a position of trust, that people had relied on her to manage their community funds responsibly, and that she had systematically violated that trust for personal gain over an extended period. He sentenced her to 4 years in prison and ordered restitution of $75,000 plus interest and legal fees. As the bailiff led Patricia away, I felt a sense of closure. This bizarre journey that had started with a simple desire to keep a walkway ice-free had exposed corruption, led to a lawsuit, and ultimately resulted in someone going to prison. It was far more than I had ever anticipated or wanted. After the sentencing, several neighbors and I went to a local diner for coffee. We talked about everything that had happened, trying to process the past year. "It is crazy when you think about it," Linda said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "All of this started because you wanted to use rock salt." "I just wanted to help people not break their ankles getting their mail," I said. "You did a lot more than that," Gregory added. He had been elected as the permanent HOA president in a special election, and he was doing a great job. "You stood up when something was not right. A lot of people would have just paid the fine and grumbled about it, but you pushed back, and because of that, we discovered that Patricia was stealing from all of us." "I had no idea about the embezzlement when I started," I pointed out. "I just thought she was being unreasonable about the salt." "But that is how these things work," Tom said. "The big problems start small. Patricia got away with little abuses of power, so she felt confident pushing further. If everyone had just gone along with her unreasonable rules, she would have kept stealing and probably taken even more." We sat there for a while longer, drinking coffee and talking about the neighborhood's future. The HOA had recovered about 60% of the stolen money through Patricia's assets and insurance. The rest would come slowly through restitution payments, assuming Patricia had any money to pay once she got out of prison. The community had voted to add stronger oversight controls, including requiring 2 board members to approve any expenditure over $500 and mandatory annual audits by an independent accounting firm. Life in Meadowbrook Estates slowly returned to normal. The neighborhood gossip moved on from Patricia's downfall to other topics like the plans for a new playground and whether to allow backyard chicken coops. I went back to being just another homeowner, though people still occasionally stopped me on the street to thank me for what I had done. The shared walkway to the mailbox cluster remained clear and safe, maintained by me and several neighbors who took turns. We used rock salt without shame or fear of violation notices. The mailboxes got repainted. New families moved in, including into Patricia's old house, which sold at a significant discount due to its history. On a cold February morning, almost exactly 1 year after this all started, I was spreading rock salt on the walkway when I noticed Gregory walking over. "Morning, Blake." "Path looks good." "Thanks, just doing my part." Gregory smiled. "You know, we are looking for someone to join the HOA board. One of the members is moving to Arizona and we will have an open seat. Any interest?" I looked at him skeptically. "After everything that happened, you want me on the board?" "Especially after everything that happened. We need people who are willing to ask questions, who will not just go along with bad ideas, and who actually care about the community. You proved you are all of those things." I thought about it for a moment, the spreader still in my hand, rock salt crunching under my boots. A year ago, I would have immediately said no. I bought this house to have a quiet place to work, not to get involved in neighborhood politics. But this past year had taught me something important. Sometimes quiet comes from being involved, from making sure the people in charge are doing the right things. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course. The election is not until March. Just let me know. He walked away and I went back to spreading salt. The sun was coming up over the houses, turning the frost on the grass into tiny diamonds. It was beautiful and peaceful, exactly what I had wanted when I moved here. Maybe being on the board would not be so bad. Someone had to make sure that the next HOA president did not turn into another Patricia. Someone had to stand up for common sense and practicality over arbitrary rules, and I had learned that I was pretty good at that. I finished salting the path and went inside to warm up. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Heard Gregory asked you to join the board. You going to do it? I typed back slowly, still thinking it through. Maybe. Someone has to make sure they don't ban rock salt again. That's the spirit. Let me know if you need campaign help. We can make yard signs. Vote Blake Norton, pro-rock salt candidate. I laughed at that image. But as ridiculous as it sounded, there was something appealing about it. Taking something negative and turning it into something positive. Using what I had learned from fighting Patricia to actually help make the community better. Over the next few weeks, I thought seriously about Gregory's offer. I attended a couple of board meetings as an observer, watching how they operated under the new, more transparent system. It seemed functional and reasonable. Nobody was trying to ban effective de-icing products or push vendor contracts for their relatives. It was actually boring in the best possible way. In March, I submitted my name for the ballot. There were 3 candidates for 2 open positions, so it was not exactly a heated race. I did not make campaign signs or go door to door. I just sent a simple email to the neighborhood explaining that I was running, because I wanted to help maintain a reasonable, practical HOA that served homeowners, rather than creating unnecessary problems. The election was held on a Saturday at the community center. It was nothing fancy, just a ballot box and some volunteers checking names off a list. I voted for myself and the other reasonable candidate, a retired school teacher named Margaret who had lived in the neighborhood for 15 years. That evening, Gregory called with the results. Margaret and I had won easily. The third candidate, who had run on a platform of even stricter rules and regulations, had gotten less than 20% of the vote. Apparently, the neighborhood had learned its lesson about giving power to people who loved rules for rules' sake. My first board meeting was in April. We covered standard topics like approving the annual budget, discussing landscaping contracts, and planning the neighborhood's summer picnic. It was mundane and administrative, exactly what an HOA should be. At the end of the meeting, Gregory asked if anyone had new business to raise. Actually, I have something, I said. Everyone looked at me, probably expecting some dramatic proposal given my history. I think we should create a community supply closet with rock salt, shovels, and ice melt for anyone to use on the shared walkways. The HOA can buy in bulk and make it available so that people do not have to use their own supplies when maintaining common areas. It would cost maybe $300 to stock it properly. There was a moment of silence, and then Margaret started laughing. Only you would join the board and immediately propose spending money on rock salt. It is practical, I said defensively, but I was smiling too. I think it is a great idea, Gregory said. All in favor. It was unanimous. The Blake Norton Rock Salt Initiative, as Tom started calling it, was approved in its first meeting. We had the supply closet set up by the end of April, and people actually used it. The shared walkways throughout Meadowbrook Estates were the safest and most well-maintained they had ever been. Serving on the HOA board was not always exciting, but it was satisfying in a different way than I had expected. I like being able to solve problems before they became huge issues. I liked having a say in how our community was run. And I liked knowing that we had systems in place to prevent another Patricia situation. The lawsuit settlement money came through that summer. Patricia's sister had agreed to pay $50,000 to settle the civil claims, and her brother-in-law's landscaping company paid another $15,000. Combined with what was recovered from Patricia's personal assets, the HOA recouped about 90% of what had been stolen. It was not perfect, but it was pretty good considering many embezzlement victims never see any restitution. We used some of that recovered money to fund new community projects, including better lighting along the walkways and a small park area that had been neglected for years. It felt good to turn something negative into tangible improvements that everyone could enjoy. By the time the next February rolled around, 2 years after the original violation notice, life in Meadowbrook Estates was genuinely peaceful. The HOA functioned smoothly and efficiently. People felt heard and respected, and the walkways were always clear and safe, thanks to abundant rock salt that nobody tried to ban. I was spreading salt one cold morning when a new neighbor approached. She and her family had just moved in the previous month. "You are Blake, right?" I wanted to introduce myself. "I am Dana Edwards." We shook hands and she smiled. "I have heard stories about you, something about taking on a corrupt HOA president." I felt my face flush. "That is a bit dramatic, but yes, there was some trouble with the previous leadership." "Well, I am glad you dealt with it before we moved in. This neighborhood seems really well run. My last HOA was a nightmare. They tried to fine me for leaving my garage door open during the day." "That will not happen here," I assured her. "We try to keep things reasonable." "I also heard you are on the board now. That must keep you busy." "Not too busy. It is mostly just making sure things run smoothly. Speaking of which, welcome to the neighborhood. If you ever need anything or have questions, feel free to reach out." Dana thanked me and headed toward her house. I went back to spreading salt, thinking about how much had changed in 2 years. I had gone from a guy who just wanted to quietly work from home to a neighborhood figure who had exposed corruption and now served on the board. It was not what I had planned, but I could not say I regretted it. That evening, I got an email from the Iowa HOA Advocacy Group, a statewide organization that worked on homeowner rights issues. They had heard about what happened in Meadowbrook Estates and wanted to know if I would be willing to speak at their annual conference about identifying and addressing HOA corruption. Apparently, our story had become something of a case study in how homeowner vigilance could protect communities. I agreed to speak, figuring it might help other people avoid similar situations. The conference was in Des Moines in May, and I ended up on a panel with attorneys, HOA management professionals, and other homeowners who had dealt with troubled associations. My presentation focused on the importance of asking questions, knowing your rights, and not being afraid to push back when something does not make sense. It started with rock salt. I told the audience of about 200 people. Such a small, silly thing. But it made me realize that our HOA president was not acting in the community's best interest. Once I started asking questions, everything else unraveled. The lesson is not to ignore your instincts. If something seems wrong or unreasonable, it probably is. And you have more power than you think to demand accountability. The presentation was well received, and afterward, several people came up to share their own HOA horror stories. Some were worse than mine. Some were similar. All of them reinforced how important it was to have engaged, informed homeowners who were willing to stand up to unreasonable authority. Flying home from Des Moines, I reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought me to this point. 2 years ago, I was just a software developer who wanted to help his neighbors by keeping a walkway clear. I had no interest in HOA politics or community activism. But when faced with an unjust rule and a leader abusing her power, I had made a choice to push back rather than comply. That choice had led to uncovering embezzlement, enduring a frivolous lawsuit, cooperating with a criminal investigation, and ultimately helping to reform how our community was governed. It had been stressful and sometimes scary, but it had also been worthwhile. Meadowbrook Estates was genuinely a better place because people had refused to accept Patricia's corruption. The thing that surprised me most was how much I had enjoyed being part of the solution. Serving on the HOA board, speaking at the conference, even just maintaining that walkway. It all gave me a sense of purpose and connection to my community that I had not realized I was missing. Working from home could be isolating, and I had not made much effort to connect with neighbors before all of this happened. In a weird way, Patricia's overreach had forced me to become more engaged, and I was better for it. Back in Cedar Rapids, life continued its steady rhythm. I went to board meetings once a month, spread rock salt on the walkways whenever it snowed, and worked my regular software development job. It was ordinary and routine, which was exactly what I had wanted in the first place. Patricia served 2 years of her 4-year sentence before being released on parole. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved to a different city, starting over somewhere people did not know her history. I hoped she had learned from her mistakes, though I doubted I would ever know. Our paths were unlikely to cross again. Her house had been sold to a young couple with twin toddlers who were constantly in their front yard, filling the air with laughter and cheerful chaos. It was nice to see something so positive replace the negative energy that had surrounded that property. On the 2-year anniversary of finding that first pink violation notice, I decided to write down the whole story. Not for publication or anything dramatic, just for myself. It seemed important to document what had happened, how one small act of resistance had cascaded into something much larger. As I wrote, I realized that the story was not really about rock salt or even about HOA corruption. It was about the power of individuals to demand accountability, to question authority when it does not make sense, and to stand up for what is right even when it would be easier to just go along. Those were lessons I would carry with me for the rest of my life, whether I was dealing with HOA issues or anything else. The story was also about community, about how people can come together to solve problems when they stop accepting bad leadership. Linda with her petition, Tom with his support, Gregory with his willingness to correct mistakes, all of them had played important roles in fixing what was broken. I had just been the catalyst, the person willing to take that first stand. I printed out my written account and put it in a folder, thinking maybe someday it would be interesting to look back on. Then I went outside to check the weather forecast. Snow was predicted for the next day, which meant I would need to get up early to salt the walkways before people headed out for work. I did not mind. In fact, I looked forward to it. There was something satisfying about taking care of that simple task, knowing that it helped people stay safe, knowing that nobody was going to find me or sue me for using the right tools to do the job properly. Tom came over that evening with beers, as he often did on Friday nights. We sat on my back porch despite the cold, bundled in jackets and watching the sunset. "You know what is funny?" Tom said. "If Patricia had just left well enough alone, she would probably still be HOA president and nobody would have ever looked closely at the finances." True. Her downfall was getting greedy and overreaching. No, her downfall was not expecting anyone to fight back. She thought she could do whatever she wanted because nobody had challenged her before. I considered that. You might be right. People get comfortable with power and forget that it comes with accountability. Exactly. That is why you being on the board now is so important. You remember what it is like to be on the other side, dealing with unreasonable rules and arbitrary authority. You will not let things slide like other people might. I hope not. Though I also hope I never get so comfortable that I stop listening to concerns. The moment I turn into another Patricia, someone needs to call me out immediately. Tom laughed. Deal. I will be your accountability buddy. If you ever try to ban rock salt, I will start a petition to remove you. Fair enough. We drank our beers in comfortable silence for a while, watching the lights come on in houses across the neighborhood. Somewhere a dog barked. A car drove past playing music too loud. Normal, everyday sounds of a functioning community. Hey Blake, Tom said eventually. Yeah. Thanks for not just paying that first fine and moving on. I know this whole thing ended up being way more than you bargained for, but you made a real difference. This neighborhood is better because you stood up. I felt embarrassed by the gratitude, but also proud. I just did what made sense at the time, though I admit, if I had known where it would all lead, I might have hesitated. But you would have still done it, right? I thought about Patricia in prison, about the recovered money funding community improvements, about the new systems preventing future corruption, about Dana Edwards and other new residents moving into a well-run neighborhood. I thought about all the people who could walk safely to their mailboxes without fear of slipping on ice or getting nonsensical fines. Yeah, I said finally, I still would have done it, and I meant it. Despite the stress, the lawsuit, the depositions, all of it, I would make the same choice again. Some things are worth fighting for, even small things like the right to use effective de-icing products on a shared walkway. Because it is never really about the small thing. It is about whether we are willing to accept unreasonable authority, or whether we will stand up and demand better. The next morning, I was up before dawn with my spreader full of rock salt, clearing the path while the rest of the neighborhood slept. The salt crunched satisfyingly under my boots as I worked, and I watched it scatter across the pavement in the beam of my flashlight. By the time the sun came up, the walkway was clear and safe, ready for another day of neighbors heading to their mailboxes without incident. It was simple, honest work that helped people. Nothing dramatic or heroic, just a basic act of community maintenance. But after everything that had happened, I had learned that these simple acts mattered. They were the foundation of a functioning neighborhood, the daily proof that people cared about each other enough to make small efforts for the common good. As I put away my spreader and headed inside for coffee, I took one last look at the clear path stretching toward the mailboxes. 2 years ago, I could not have imagined that this simple walkway would become the center of such drama. But I also could not have imagined how much I would learn and grow from the experience. Sometimes the best stories start with the smallest conflicts, rock salt and ice and a homeowner who just wanted to do the right thing. This was my story, and while it had not turned out how I expected, I would not change a thing.